Hello, it's Lexi at Cozy Tea Cafe over on Bookstagram, and today I'm going to be summarizing House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas, book 1 in the Crescent City series. If you're not familiar with these videos, they will be full of spoilers, in-depth plot points from the beginning to the end, so if you have not read Crescent City and you don't want it spoiled, don't continue watching. We start off with Bryce and her bestie Danica, who is a powerful shape-shifting wolf, and Future Prime, which is like a sort of leader for the wolves. And they're at the gallery where Bryce works, and Danica leaves her ancient sword there. At their apartment, the rest of the Pack of Devils, the wolf pack, is gathered, and Connor, who is Danica's second in command, clearly likes Bryce despite her anti-wolf dating policy. Bryce is a half-human, half-fae, and the secret daughter of the Autumn King, making Prince Rune Danon her brother, but she's currently estranged from both her dad and her brother. She's getting ready for a date with her boring boyfriend, and Connor finally gets the courage to ask her out. During dinner, she dumps her boyfriend and texts Connor, agreeing to one date, then goes out with her friends Fury and Juniper, while Danica spends her night off with the pack of wolves. Bryce stumbles home drunk and high and finds the entire pack slaughtered in the apartment, including Danica and Connor. A demon chases her out into the streets, and she sees an angel being attacked in an alleyway. She saves the angel by attacking the demon and ends up wounded, then calls for help and wakes up in custody where she meets the Umbra Mortis, Hunt Athalar, and his commander Isaiah. Then Danica's cruel mother Sabine immediately barges in and blames her for Danica's death. Rune claims Bryce under Fae jurisdiction and has her released, and the remaining wolves turn on Bryce and ban her from Danica's funeral. 2 years later, Bryce lives in the apartment Danica left for her in her will, and has been completely sober since the murders, and has mostly lost contact with her friend Fury. At the Raven nightclub, Bryce sells an art piece to notorious vampire Maximus Tertian, and he implies that she owes him something more than just the painting. Rune intervenes and warns her to stay out of trouble before the once-per-decade leadership summit and walks her home, and we learn that they used to be best friends as kids. We see Hunt's backstory where he fought beside his lover, the Archangel Shahar, in her rebellion against her twin sister Sandriel. They lost the battle, and he watched Shahar die and was branded a slave and a rebel. The governor of Crescent City, Micah, bought him as his personal assassin and promised to free him after Hunt atones for every death that occurred under his command during the rebellion, which is over 2,000. Isaiah and Hunt find Bryce at work and tell her that Maximus Tertian was murdered exactly like Danica and the Pack of Wolves, meaning that Briggs, the suspect who's behind bars for the murder, is actually innocent and the real killer is still out there. Micah recruits Bryce to help solve the murders before Sandriel and the Asteri arrive for the summit. Micah assigns Hunt as her personal bodyguard, and if they solve the case before the summit, Micah will drastically reduce Hunt's remaining life debts in his sentence. We learn that Rune has shadow magic and is Starborn Fae, and won the Star Sword from the continent of Avalon. All Fae visit the Oracle at the age of 13 as a rite, and we learned that Rune has lied about the Oracle's prophecy for his whole life, and the truth is that the royal bloodline will end with him. The Autumn King arranges a marriage between Rune and the new Witch Queen Hypaxia, and tasks him with finding Luna's horn that went missing shortly before Danica and the pack were murdered. Hunt meets Bryce's chimera Syrinx, and she doesn't seem to realize chimeras have hidden magical abilities, and they were long ago deemed as lowers in the class system. Bryce follows a lead through Tertian's girlfriend and learns that both he and Danica had connections to the dangerous Viper Queen. Bryce sneaks out to the meat market that's run by the Viper Queen, and Hunt follows her. She asks a salt dealer for illegal obsidian salt, which Hunt realizes can summon demons directly from the rifts. Buying it alerts the Viper Queen, which was Bryce's plan all along, and after Bryce questions her, the Viper Queen says Danica was a threat to her and Maximus was a pain, but not worth her trouble, and she gives Bryce proof of her alibis for both murders, then cryptically tells her to look where it hurts. Bryce struggles to retrace Danica's final days and asks Hunt for help, and she learns that he's 233 and was only 33 when he led Shahar's rebellion. Rune secretly meets Bryce at Luna's temple and reveals that he found an ancient text describing a Crystallos demon, which seems like the same demon Bryce saw the night of the murders. The Prince of the Pit, aka the Star Eater, created the demon to steal Luna's horn from the first Starborn prince, Peleus, during the First Wars. Peleus used the horn to banish the Prince of the Pit and all his demons back into hell, then sealed the Northern Rift, but the horn shattered in the process and Peleus died. Since Rune is Starborn, he thinks he can track the horn and then plans to let the Crystallos lead them to whoever is controlling it. Hunt brings Bryce to a new Crystallos crime scene, and they see that a temple acolyte who was connected to the horn's disappearance was murdered. Bryce has PTSD from being at the crime scene, and she learns that the angel she saved 2 years ago was Micah, and she's mad that everyone kept his identity from her. Bryce runs off to the Raven and meets Juniper, and both Hunt and Rune follow her. They realize she's only drinking water and hasn't drank since Danica died. Hunt also notices the scar on her leg from the Crystallos attack and realizes she never had it healed. While they're there, the club is bombed, and Bryce jumps over Juniper to protect her, even though Juniper has made the magical drop that grants them immortality, and Bryce hasn't yet. Rune believes the bombing is part of the human rebellion and thinks it might be connected to the Horn investigation. Afterward, Bryce agrees to let Hunt stay in her apartment with her as her bodyguard. Juniper visits and says Fury is coming home to help investigate the bombing. Later, Hunt asks Bryce about her relationship with Rune, and she explains that they were once best friends, but then they had a falling out after a nasty fight. Rune joins Bryce, Hunt, and the fire sprite Lahaba in the secret library beneath the gallery. They discover that Danica was stationed at Luna's temple right before the horn disappeared, and they suspect she came into contact with it, which then made her a target for the Crystallos. Rune also uncovers the story of Fey Queen Thea and her daughter Helena, who married Prince Peleus, and Thea's bloodline was Starborn. Hunt and Bryce visit the Comitium and barely avoid Sandriel's arrival, and Bryce turns down Micah's invitation to dinner. Later, Hunt visits the Oracle, and she tells him someone wants the horn to reopen the Northern Rift, and warns him to stay away from Bryce. Bryce tells Hunt that when she visited the Oracle at 13, the Oracle screamed and clawed out her own eyes and was blinded for a week, and that's when Bryce's father abandoned her. Bryce and Hunt question Briggs, the original suspect, and Briggs believed Danica secretly sympathized with the human rebellion after she secretly let some rebels escape, and Bryce realizes there was much more to Danica than she knew. Rune's friend and roommate, Declan Emmett, agrees to re-examine the temple footage from the night it went missing. Hunt gets a call from his commander, Isaiah, and says there's been another murder at Asphodel Meadows. The victim was the temple guard who was present the night the horn disappeared, and Bryce realizes every attack has happened along the city's ley lines where magic flows from. Declan finds that the security footage from the horn's disappearance was tampered with, and the audio seems to be coming from the Heart Gate across town instead of the temple. Someone with authority must have messed with the audio, and since Sabine oversaw the original case, the crew starts to view her as a serious suspect. Rune consults a medwitch about whether or not the broken horn could be magically repaired, and is clearly attracted to her. Another angel named Victoria discovers evidence that the demon has been traveling along the ley lines and sewer systems. While reviewing the footage, Hunt is touching Bryce, and Victoria gives him a warning look. Hunt and Bryce visit Therian, the mayor commander of intelligence for the River Queen, and ask him to keep an eye out for any suspicious activity through the waterways. Next, they question Sabine at the den about Danica being present at Luna's temple the night the horn went missing, and her knowledge of the Crystallos. Sabine lies about Danica being there and seems suspiciously unsurprised by the demon's name. On their way out, Amelie and Connor's brother Ethan berate Bryce, and Ethan tells her that she never deserved Connor, and Bryce quietly agrees. Bryce opens up to Hunt and tells him what happened after Danica's death. Her text messages from that night were leaked to the press, which led to public humiliation and harassment, specifically from the other wolves, and she came close to suicide before Juniper showed up at her lowest point and stayed with her for a few days to make sure she was okay, and Hunt gains an even deeper understanding of Bryce. While Hunt is out with some friends, Bryce visits the Five Roses, aka Firo Gardens. Naomi is on watch and alerts Hunt that Bryce left, so he follows her, and the Crystallos attacks them and poisons Hunt, which temporarily disables his magic. Together, they kill the demon, but Bryce thinks it's suspicious that it was killed so easily. Sabine confronts Hunt and Bryce on Bryce's rooftop, and they accuse Sabine of stealing the horn and murdering Danica. Sabine admits that Danica stole the horn, but denies summoning the demon and says she's been waiting for them on the roof all night and claims she only covered up Danica's theft to protect her daughter's legacy. Bryce and Hunt tell Rune what they learned, and Rune reveals that the Star Sword doesn't have any power without the twin dagger knife that was forged from the same meteorite and lost eons ago. Therion's investigation finds several deaths that match the Crystallos' method of killing, which includes a paralytic poisoning of its victims, and 2 victims were from around the time of Danica's murder. Then Bryce realizes the Crystallos couldn't have killed Danica and the pack because their injuries were completely different, and she thinks that 2 separate demons or killers must be involved, one to hunt the horn and another to kill anyone who has information on it. Bryce summons Adis, the prince of the 5th level of Hell, who recognizes her from when she was 13. He doesn't give them much info, but urges them to re-examine the evidence and tells Bryce to find him again after she makes the drop because he saw what the Oracle could not. Bryce tells Hunt that Adis appeared to her as a cat after her disastrous Oracle visit and asked her what blinds an Oracle. Bryce learns that the Autumn King prevented additional testing during the original murder investigation to keep the Fae out of it. Bryce is frustrated and ends up at a bar and breaks her sobriety, then insults Hunt when he comes after her. Bryce goes back home and apologizes to Hunt with homemade dinner, and they have a heart-to-heart about grief and fear. While Bryce is sleeping, Adis appears again and cryptically tells her to make the drop so they can finish this. Micah sends Hunt on another killing assignment, and Bryce comforts him when he comes home, and their attraction continues to heat up. Victoria runs tests on Danica's clothing from the crime scene and finds traces of a synthetic drug called synth, which combines magic, tech, and organic material, and has healing properties powerful enough to potentially repair the horn. It's manufactured by Redner Industries, where Danica worked part-time, and is made using black obsidian salt, meaning it could potentially summon powerful demons. Therion reveals that Danica was seen performing a synth deal shortly before her death, but Bryce believes Danica discovered synth could heal the horn, stole the horn to keep it from being used, and was investigating the drug before she died. Bryce finally talks to Fury after 2 years and confirms Danica warned her to stay away from synth because it was dangerous. On Danica's birthday, Bryce is emotional that no one else remembered, and she gets a chocolate croissant with Hunt to honor her. Inside the box, the word trash is written, and Hunt immediately knows it was Amelie, so he goes after her and threatens her to leave Bryce alone. Ethan is there and realizes the date and sees what Amelie did and seems upset by this. Micah calls Hunt and Bryce to the comitium and reveals that Sabine is demanding punishment for Hunt attacking Amelie. Micah performs the living death by cutting off his wings while Bryce begs him to stop. Isaiah quietly assures her that will grow back, but the pain is agonizing. Bryce angry texts Ethan, and he swears he didn't know what Sabine was going to do. Rune helps care for Hunt while Bryce continues working and investigating. Bryce tries to crack Danica's password one last time and unlocks her files with the password, "With love, all is possible," which was her favorite quote. Danica's files seem empty until Bryce finds a hidden folder meant specifically for her with a photo of the 2 of them in it. Bryce thinks it's a clue and finds a secret compartment in Danica's leather jacket with a flash drive inside. On the flash drive, they find footage of a human being injected with synth, then she shreds every veneer sent into the cell into bits before turning on herself, and the scene looks exactly the same as the Pack's murder. Hunt and Bryce start to get intimate, but his injured wings ruin the moment. Later, Bryce sneaks back into her old apartment to look for clues, but sees the building is on fire and suspects someone found out Danica's files had been accessed and is destroying evidence. Therian tells Bryce he was tipped off about a synth exchange happening on the river. They sneak off to spy on the exchange in a boat and catch the Viper Queen making a deal with Hunt, Victoria, and Justinian. Then Micah and the other angels arrive to arrest them. Hunt admits he, Victoria, and Justinian wanted the synth to become powerful enough to break free of their witch crowns and slavery, but he changed his mind after seeing what the drug could do and came to stop the deal. Micah claims that Danica was secretly addicted to synth, sold it on the streets, then accidentally murdered the pack while she was high, and accidentally summoned the crystallos with the obsidian salt used in the drug. Hunt and the others are arrested, and Bryce says she never wants to see him again. Micah reveals that the Viper Queen was in on the setup, and Fury arrives and takes Bryce home. Later, Isaiah tells Bryce that Justinian was executed and Victoria's soul was trapped in a jar and dumped into the ocean, but Hunt is in a cell after Micah confirmed he was telling the truth and intending to stop the deal. The Autumn King visits Bryce at work, and she refuses to help him search for the horn. He admits that he loved her mother and regrets the scars he gave her, but Bryce still wants nothing to do with him. Micah gives Hunt back to Sandriel as punishment, and Fury tells Bryce what happened and says not to do anything reckless, then reveals that her and Juniper are actually in a relationship. Bryce doesn't listen to her warning and shows up to the Comitium and asks to buy Hunt's freedom, but Sandriel says no. Bryce offers to go in his place, and Sandriel publicly outs her as the Autumn King's daughter. Rune intervenes and claims her as his to stop the trade. Bryce promises Hunt that she'll save him, then she's attacked by the Crystallos on her way home. Rune and his friends rescue Bryce, but she's mad at Rune for stopping her from saving Hunt. The summit officially begins, and it's revealed that the Med Witch they've been working with is actually Queen Hypaxia, the new Witch Queen who is supposed to be betrothed to Rune, and she admits that she wanted to investigate the murders and experience a little normalcy before taking the throne. Micah appears at the gallery's secret library and somehow bypasses every ward protecting him. Bryce texts Jessica, and she streams a live feed of the library for the whole summit to see. She realizes the library has been discovered and orders the Aux to go there and save the books. Bryce senses something is wrong and secretly signals for Syrinx and Lahaba to escape, then Micah demands to know where Luna's horn is. Micah finally reveals the truth that he is the one who financed Redner Industries, manipulated Danica into stealing the horn, and realizes she suspected his plans to use Synth to repair it. He murdered the pack by forcing Danica to take Synth until she lost control and killed everyone, including herself. He figured out that Danica had the horn ground into powder and tattooed onto Bryce's back when he saw the old language in her tattoo. He kept summoning Crystallos to track the horn, and it kept finding her. He also manipulated the Autumn King into searching for the horn, and plans to use Bryce to open portals to other worlds and build an army that will defeat the rebellion and give him the power of an Asteri. Micah injects Bryce with the synth to heal the horn's power inside her, and throws Syrinx into the gallery's tank with a deadly knock creature. Bryce and Lahaba use the library's ancient magical books to temporarily trap Micah in a bathroom, while Bryce dives in to save Syrinx. The summit watches everything unfold, and Declan realizes Bryce is undergoing the ordeal, which is basically a trial you endure before making the drop. Bryce saves Syrinx and is injured, but Lahaba chooses to stay behind and hold Micah off. Bryce reveals she'd secretly purchased Lahaba's freedom days earlier, but Lahaba already knew because she peeked in her desk drawer. Lahaba insists on defending her friends and says, "My friends are with me and I'm not afraid," as she sacrifices herself by destroying the tank and flooding the gallery, dying to buy Bryce time to escape. The entire summit honors her sacrifice by putting their hands to their heart. Instead of fleeing, Bryce goes to Jessica's office and grabs the Godslayer rifle and chugs Hypaxia's synth antidote. When Micah reaches her, she shoots him through the head, cuts him apart with Danica's sword, and burns the body and vacuums up the ashes to make sure no one can heal him. Bryce goes outside and sees that Micah succeeded in opening portals throughout the city, and there is chaos as demons pour through all 7 gates into Crescent City. Back at the summit, Hypaxia secretly frees Hunt from his chains, and Rune says the Asteri will kill Bryce for this. Bryce races towards the meadows to protect the humans trapped there, while the Autumn King and Sabine order their troops to remain inside so they don't risk their own people. Hypaxia sends her witches to fight, and the Prime sees Bryce fighting on the screen and calls her a true wolf. When Bryce calls for help, Ethan is the first to answer, and he brings the wolves, disobeying Sabine. Then Therian, the Viper Queen, Fury, and others come to help. Bryce and Ethan are fighting side by side until the shelter doors start to close. Bryce knows they won't both make it, so she shoves Ethan to safety and continues fighting. Bryce calls Hunt to say goodbye and asks him to give a final message to her loved ones. She forgives Rune and apologizes for her secrets, then heads towards the gate as her starborn light starts to shine, and she reveals herself as the heir to the starborn Fae. A flashback reveals that Bryce has hid her starborn gifts since childhood and once used them to save Danica and herself from being killed the day the photo on Danica's computer was taken. When the Oracle looked within her at 13, she was blinded by her starborn power. Bryce sends her power towards the Heart Gate's prism to amplify it and shield that gate in light, preventing any more demons from entering. The Autumn King calls Bryce's mom, Ember, to confront her on Bryce's starborn gifts, and Ember says Bryce didn't want to take Rune's starborn title away from him. Hypaxia secretly removes Hunt's slave crown, which is made from witch's ink, while Sandriel alerts the Asteri of Bryce's starborn power and the horn tattoo. Now that Hunt's magic is freed, he kills Sandriel with his bare hands, and him, Rune, and Fury take a helicopter to help Bryce fight. The Asteri arrive in Lunathian and launch brimstone missiles at the city that contain chemicals to stop Vanir healing in order to destroy the demons, unbothered that they're killing all of the civilians in the process. Bryce's foot is trapped, and Hunt dives out of the helicopter and guards her from the blast, and is horrifically injured with his arms and legs blown off. Bryce realizes the only way to save the city is to complete the drop at the gate, so the first light generated would be amplified through the city's ley lines, so she calls out over the Heartgate speakers and asks for an anchor. No one answers until she hears Danica telling her to light it up as the people in the summit watch in shock. The gate is amplifying Bryce's starborn power, and she begins the drop while everyone in the summit insists she can't survive without a living body as an anchor. Bryce's drop surpasses both Rune and the Autumn King's energy levels, but the issue is coming back up from that much power, especially without an anchor. Her drop generated enough first light to seal the gates, repair the city, and heal Hunt and the rest of the wounded, while Bryce is still at the depth of her power. Bryce sees Danica's spirit and says she just wants to give up because life is too hard to live without her, but Danica convinces her that she and Connor want her to keep living and helps propel Bryce upward with a blast of magic. Bryce starts her ascent with almost no time remaining on the drop timer, while Hunt is still performing chest compressions to keep her body alive. Everyone at the summit is still watching, and the Prime points at the screen and says, "Through love, all is possible." Bryce emerges and successfully survives the drop. The Asteri remove Hunt's slave brand, but warns Bryce to stay quiet about the horn and Micah and Sandriel's deaths. Bryce reunites with Rune, and they promise to work on repairing their relationship. While walking Syrinx, Bryce sees a mist briefly part in the Bone Quarter, and she sees Connor and the rest of the pack waving to her. Danica is gone because she gave up her own eternity to save Bryce in the drop. In the epilogue, Jessica and Adis meet and reveal that Bryce's power is the same as Queen Thea's, and Adis hints that Hunt's mysterious father would have been proud. So that is where Book 1 ends. I will be summarizing both Book 2 and Book 3 before the 6th ACOTAR book releases in October. And as always, if there are any other books you would like me to summarize, just leave me a comment and I'll do my best.